Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we are talking about one of the most important sculpting tools, the Flatten Tool. We're going to demonstrate how it can be used with our landscapes to raise or lower parts of our height map here to a desired level. I like to use this to make plateaus and mountainous terrain, as well as terraces like you see done with various terrace farms in parts of the world. You can even use this to help create things like sand dunes and river gorges. Now, before starting to record this video, I thought I better prepare a map ahead of time to just have some lumpy terrain. It's going to make demonstrating the Flatten Tool that much easier. I am in my Content, Landscapes, Maps folder. You can see the directory right down here. That's the one I created all these lumps in to demonstrate some of these tools. And in order to work with the Flatten Tool, I have to make sure I am in landscape mode. Then let's make sure we've got the Sculpt tab here selected. And then over on the left-hand side where we have all of our sculpting tools, make sure you have the Flatten Tool selected. Now, this is a pretty simple tool to work with on the surface, although it's got many layers of depth. So if I just zoom up in on the side of my rough-looking mountains right here, you can see my brush. I've got familiar parameters here for my brush settings, brush size and brush fall off. And all I got to do to flatten the terrain is left-click anywhere on my landscape. Now it's going to sample, that is, choose the value wherever I begin to left-click and flatten it to that height. So you can see right here I've got my brush on the side of this mountain. I'm going to hold down left-click right now. And you can see it already started to flatten it. And as I hold down my left mouse button and move it around, you can see how the landscape is terraforming here to be flattened to that desired height. Now you'll notice that the landscape above is being lowered to meet my flattened height. And the landscape that is below this height is raising up to flatten to that level as well. And this is because right now our flatten mode is both. Flatten may both raise and lower values. Now let me undo this. I'm going to hit Control plus Z here to undo that. Again, Control plus Y will redo. Control plus Z will undo. And I'm going to change my flatten mode here to raise. And as it says in the tooltip, flatten may only raise values. So values above this click point will be left unchanged. So now notice, I'm going to sample right here, hold down left click. Terrain that is below this point will raise up to flatten to that level. However, I'm still continuing to hold down left click. It's got no effect on terrain above this level. I'm going to do Control plus Z to undo. Let's change our flatten mode here to lower. This is going to have the opposite effect. So now if I left click and sample, values that are above my sample point will be lowered to meet my desired flattened level. However, values below where I sampled will have no effect. I'm continuing to hold down the left mouse button right now, but I am in lower flatten mode, so only terrain that is above my sample point will be lowered. Okay, let's go on to interval. So this is going to flatten to the closest specific terrace interval at my clicked point. Now, if I click on this, I need to reveal some advanced settings down here. And I set some of these ahead of time. So I've currently got this terrace interval value set to 1000. So that means it's going to find the closest height of 1000 in different 1000 increments. So say that this is the 1000 Unreal Unit level, 2000, 3000, 4,000, etc. It'll pick the closest one and flatten it to that level. So if I sample right here and left click, it'll find the closest 1,000 Unreal Unit value and flatten to it. However, if I click right about here, it will find the closest 1,000 Unreal Unit level and flatten there. And if I click right about here, it's going to pick there. So these are all in different increments of 1,000 Unreal Units. Now let me do Control plus Z to undo a few times there. Now let's try Flatten Mode Terrace. And this one is pretty cool because it creates a sort of Minecraft looking look to our landscape here. Let me increase my brush size to be rather large as well. So I've got Flatten Mode of Terrace. And I'm setting my terrace interval to 1000. So this is going to have different levels of one. Actually, let me set this down to 500. So I'm going to have 500 Unreal units difference of height between my different levels here. And let me just zoom on back and you'll see what this does. If I left click and kind of rub this all around, you can see how I've kind of created a terrace farm here. Now you may have seen, like in parts of Japan where they grow rice on different levels, they will actually create landscapes like this so that they can grow rice on different elevations like this, cut some cuts like this into the mountainside. So this is how you can create a look like this. Now I'm going to do Control+Z to undo this. Now notice my terrace interval here was 500. Control+Z. I'm going to now set this to be 1000. And I'm going to left click. And now notice I don't have quite as many layers because my terrace interval is bigger. That's the different height levels in Unreal units. Control+Z. If I do 2000, you'll see an even greater difference. Like so. Okay, now I'm going to change this back to, we'll say 1000. Now this terrace smoothing is going to try to make it so that there's actually some smoothness between those different levels. Currently, if I click with my terrace smoothing at 0, you'll notice there's some very jagged edges in between my layers. Control+Z here. If I set this all the way up to 1, which is my maximum level here, and left click, you'll notice that I don't even see any levels. That's because I'm smoothing it completely. Let me do Control+Z there and set my control or terrace smoothing to something like 0.75. So now it's going to create those layers, but you don't see quite as many jaggies along those ridges there. You see a few, but it's not quite as bad as when my terrace smoothing was down at a value of 0. Let me just do Control+Z one more time. Let's start picking our way through some of these tool settings over here, and I'm going to set my flatten mode back to its default both. So tool strength, this is going to do kind of what you think it's going to do. If I set my tool strength to a value of 1 and I sample right about here, it is going to flatten it pretty much immediately with a click. However, if I undo this and set my tool strength to something like 0.05 and then I left click, it'll flatten it, but I kind of have to rub the brush over this spot again and again to flatten it to its desired level. So this is essentially how quickly do you want to flatten it. Let me set it back to default here. Flatten target. So if we turn this on, you'll notice something, that this show preview grid also showed up as well. So if I turn it off, that is grayed out. If I turn it on, it shows up. And I'm going to set a flatten target here to be 1000. Now when I do, and this may be a little bit hard to capture on camera. In fact, let me set this to 3000. And let me zoom up a little bit. You can see a little preview mesh right there. That is what this show grid preview is doing. See how I'm clicking it on and off? It goes away or appears. Now I'm saying I want to flatten to a target of 3000 Unreal units. So now it doesn't matter where I am sampling from. I am hard setting the Unreal Engine height that I want to set it to, which in this case is 3000 Unreal units. So that is how I can determine exactly how high in Unreal units I flatten something to. I highly recommend that if you're flattening to target here, you have the show preview grid on. I don't know why you wouldn't have that on, but it is worth talking about. Now let me just undo this quickly, and I'm back out of flatten target mode. Combined layers operation. So we currently are doing all of this flattening and all of our sculpting on one single layer here. With this checked, if you're flattening and you have multiple layers, it's going to apply it to all the layers that you have some sculpting done upon. Obviously, if this is unchecked, it will only apply your flattening to the selected layer that you're trying to sculpt upon, kind of like we talked about in the last video. Just a quick camera cut here while I zoom down lower here to demonstrate a couple of these other tool settings. This Use Slope Flatten is really useful because it flattens to the angle of a clicked point instead of the horizontal elevation. So let me click this on, and down here I'm going to sample right about here on the side of my mountain. This is about a 45-degree angle, give or take. And if I left click and hold and rub this over the surface, that's actually steeper than 45 degrees, but you can see how it's flattening this entire ridge to that exact angle. Now this is great for creating something like this. Some of these mountains here in Italy, kind of slabs of protruding rocks. You can see how we could create this, and you could even do that to create some of these slabs of rock pushing up in the background here as well. Now let me just do Control+Z to undo that. Let's uncheck Use Slope Flatten, and let's check this Pick Value Per Apply. What this does, and the tooltip tells you, is it's going to constantly pick new values to flatten towards when we're rubbing our brush all around instead of our first click point. So instead of flattening everything to wherever we click, if I rub this over my mountain range here and down below, you can see how it's constantly resampling which elevation to flatten towards. So this is great for creating some quick sort of terraces, as well as just some lumpy terrain that doesn't look too flat all the way around. Now, I have used a combination of these tools before, Use Slope Flatten as well as Pick Value Per Apply, to try to create some sand dunes. Now, I'm not going to do a very good job, but I'm going to come over here quickly, and with both of these turned on, you can kind of create some undulating hills that look like they're sort of windswept and blown to create more of a sand dune style feel. Now again, it takes a lot of tweaking and tuning with the values to do that, but it is possible to achieve something like sand dunes. Now, Flatten Tool, what is a great use for this? Well, let's assume this is some mountainous terrain and we want to have a city or a castle up on the hillside. We could simply, let me uncheck these. My flat mode is both right here. Left click, create a simple terrace. And then if I jump out of this and go back into my modes panel, place a cube. Let's assume that this guy is a nice looking castle mesh. Zoom up in on this. Hit the end key to snap it down to the ground. Then I'm going to hit my space bar to bring on my scale tool. Scale this up kind of big. Raise it up into the air. Press the end key. And there you go. That's my nice castle on a hillside. So there you have it. The Flatten Tool, one of the most useful sculpting tools available. That'll do it all for this one, guys. We will see you in the next one.